weekend in Pleasanton on site. Tell me about it. Who was your favorite player to watch?
Oh my gosh, it was Todd. We just got to see a lot of young juniors from 7 different countries that were represented as they're getting ready for Worlds. It was just an action-packed event. And for me, Todd, one of my new favorite players joining amongst the ranks of Jake Bredenbeck is Gerson Miranda Martinez. He's exciting. He got buzzsawed by Moscoso, but watching him play with the passion he has is incredible. Who did you get a chance to watch?
I was like you. I was watching the favorites. I was hoping for some upsets. I was hoping for my fantasy team to carry me through to another victory.
Yeah, it was really cool and so much to unpack over this weekend. Super important for Moscoso to have won. It's great to see Rodrigo in a final. Some all-out battles, tiebreakers every single quarterfinal. It was action-packed.
Welcome to Fantasy Fastbreak, the racquetball fantasy podcast that puts you in the seat of the GM and delivers insider breakdowns you won't find anywhere else.
Right. Well, let's set the stage real quick for our listeners. As mentioned, we're recapping the Golden State Open. This is the third year, I believe, that this crew has done this. For those of you that are not aware, they're at the Bay Club in Pleasanton, which is it's a very historic club. It's been there for decades. The club services a lot of the Northern Cal. It's on the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it draws from San Francisco, the suburbs, San Jose, Oakland, but it also draws players from the 209, which, if you're not aware, is kind of like one of the biggest junior development areas that we have in our sport. So I think, Brian, it's fair to say we saw a lot of not only locals from the 209 and from the Stockton area, but we also saw, as you mentioned, a lot of the juniors, a lot of new international juniors that, frankly, I think we had multiple people make their pro debuts this weekend.
Yeah, over 35 participants spread out amongst the junior division, which shows such a healthy spotlight for the sport of racquetball. As we talked about, 7 different countries. One of the takeaways for the older people that were there, the question I asked them, who was fortunate enough to get beat by a 12-year-old this weekend? Because the talent's incredible, and they're starting them young. The development that we got to see in Stockton, when we watched the row hostels and the horns come through, we're now seeing it, the adaptation of what's happened across beyond our borders. And Bolivia, Guatemala, Venezuela, Costa Rica, Argentina, they all have amazing players that are translating into the pro game. So it's just so exciting to watch right now.
Yeah, I like this time of year because, we're getting closer to World Juniors. So by this point in October, all of the countries around the world have basically had their junior national events. USA has ours in June. Mexico has it a little bit later. Canada has theirs in May alongside of their amateur nationals. And then around the country, everyone's on a different cadence. But World Juniors is the first weekend in December. And so what we start to see is these federations paying to send a lot of their kids into, up here, I say up here because a lot of the countries that we're talking about are, like you mentioned, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Bolivia, Argentina. They're sending their players north to come and play pro events. And what happens is we get to see some of these new players that we may not know about. Last year around this time, the new person to talk about was Jonathan Flores, the 18 under world junior champion from Bolivia, but who had never set foot in the United States to play. Now the guy's number 15 seed, and he's making noise in pro events.
Absolutely. And as we get to this breakdown, Todd, I got to tell you, as much as Gerson Miranda is one of my new favorite players to be watching, very interested to see what he's going to do, I don't think there's anyone that turned heads more than that quarterfinal between Flores and Moscoso. Flores was phenomenal. He is technically sound, can match the speed of those top players that play with a quickness. The pace he puts on the ball is in a league of its own, up there with the likes of a Moscoso and a Kane Wasselenchuk and a Jake Bredenbeck. It's a different speed. Obviously, Montoya can match it at times. Javier Mar can do that in Alana Terra. But it's different. There's a different speed, the way it catches the floor. He's just quick. He has the hands. He has the power. And he showed this weekend he has the aptitude to play with these guys as he pushed Moscoso, the eventual winner, 11-7 breaker.
Yeah, 100%. Like Sudsy has talked really glowingly about him, and it'll be really great to see, how far he can get, how quickly. Before we get into the breakdown of fantasy, Brian, you were on site this weekend. You did a lot of announcing. You did a lot of, you were 10 feet from a lot of these players. Talk us through, like, how was the experience being on site? How was it doing broadcasting this time around?
I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face. This is an event you don't want to miss. Altogether, they almost maxed out the event with participation. They hit 212. I think a few more trickled in, so maybe they hit the 220 mark. They maxed out at 250, and courts were growing the entire time. We did get to see the element of play, this specific club where it was constantly being used, the championship courts. So as the latter matches game, you're really dealing with the difficulty of the humidity of the court. They did the best they could to keep it, to keep the quality of ball up, but those courts were being exercised. We're going to go into some really good talk about these players as we break down our picks for the 17s, the 10 through 16, the 5 through 8, and the 1 through 4. And as we go through those specific regions, Todd, that's what I'd love to comment on the players. But as far as the experience of the GSO, incredible. LPRT is the addition this year. The ladies were just as exciting as the men. The mixed doubles was phenomenal. The food, which is important for a guy of my stature, was incredible. It was nonstop. It was really cool to see the tour introduce a new cheer. See if I can use my words here. New tour sponsor, Black and White Energy Drink. It was really cool to see the main presenting sponsor, Craig Rolandelli, in the stands. He was there for most of the matches and just an approachable guy. And then obviously the full stature of the broadcasting team that did not stop the entire time. Shout out to Tim Baghurst for the LPRT, and then obviously Kerry Rittmeyer and Richard Eisman, Pablo Favahar, and the whole broadcasting component. It was just incredible. Brent was there and Walter Ramos doing the lights and the presentation. I mean, I can go on, but it took a whole village, including the parents of Adam and Mia and Bobby Horn and Erica. Obviously the tournament desk, Steve Cook and John Ellis, former world number one, which is cool. You feel the community event, but you also feel the international flair. And every beat was methodically thought out from what the amateurs' experience is, whether they are getting that gold pass or the VIP pass upstairs, to the ambiance of the Bay Club, which is, talk about a destination. This is not a hallway tournament that's just, forgotten about. It was like extra real estate for the club. This is dead center in the middle of the club. You walk into it. It's the way you get to the locker room, to the swimming pool. It's in prime time. So many takeaways. I highly recommend everyone setting their plans for this event. You don't want to miss it.
All right. So, Brian, thanks for that eyewitness account. You're Johnny on the spot. You're a Cub reporter. Enjoyed the review of your time online. Let's get into fantasy breakdown. We're going to talk about the 4 groupings that make up our fantasy teams and who kind of won each of the groupings. We're going to go from the lowest rank to the highest rank first. Brian, in our 17 plus our wild cards, we had kind of a chalky weekend, meaning that we didn't have a single 17 and up seed that got an upset and advanced past the round of 32. However, we did see some notable performances throughout the weekend from a few players. You want to break them down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to start with DJ Mendoza. It was really good to see a young up-and-comer from the US of A. He took on a tough Kadeem Carrasco. Great weekend for him. We'll get to him next. But DJ Mendoza would make the round of 16, but ultimately he would lose. He would play Kadeem and ultimately would push him 11-8 breaker. It's good to see him playing that kind of ball. He came out of the court and first thing he says is, Pineda, sorry I ruined your picks. And I just told, we laughed and I just said, hey, dude, this is where the consistency of playing all the events, this is where it happens. I would just pass that sage advice that don't just pick and choose. Obviously, sponsors are a big deal and they make it happen. But this is where you got to be advocating for yourself and make it so that you're at the full schedule so you can get your reps in, right? So you're not just dying on the sword of these one events. But great to see him play Kadim so well. I actually got to watch that firsthand. That was great. The other part is Santiago Borja got to make the main court. It was great to see him play. Eventually, I think he'd go out to Mar. And then Alvaro Guillen, I got to watch a little bit. Great player out of Costa Rica, I believe. So it's good to see more up and coming. You actually see some flair of the Andres Acuna game come out of him, but he's got great length to him. He was eventually in the finals of the Open against DJ Mendoza. So it's cool to see those two guys battle in the Open division where DJ would come out on top. But those to me were the top players in the round, or the 17 plus to watch. What about you?
Yeah, no, 100%. Borja, I had my eye on him from the get-go. As a matter of fact, when it came time to picking my wild card, I picked other because we forgot to put Borja as an option. Junior world champion, 16 and under. I thought that he might have a notable impression, and sure enough, I mean, he pressed Mar. He lost 14 and 11 in the round of 32 against the number 2 seed. That's a heck of a showing. Likewise with Guillen, it's great to see another top player out of Costa Rica. We really haven't seen another top level player since Felipe Camacho kind of stopped touring a few years back. So hopefully we can see some more out of some more Costa Ricans kind of pour into the sport. Let's pivot to the 9 to 16 range. You had a lot of players to choose from in the 9 to 16 range, and I know that you and I differed in our pick. As you mentioned, you picked Gastelum. I ended up picking Garcia, who lost 11-9 to Paria, so that blew my fantasy pick. Your winner, though, for the weekend from this group, even though Martel, as a 9 to 16 advance, got a really solid win to get into the quarters, and Karim Carrasco, as mentioned, won his first ever professional quarter by getting a walkover against Natera, who I guess had a kind of a flare-up of his knee. But your winner was your number 15 seeded Flores, who downed Javier Mar in the first game 15-10 before Javier had to retire with an injury. And so Flores is a 15 seed into the quarters. So that's your winner for that segment.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. It was great to see Martel out there. Here's the truth of it. He last year, unfortunately, it was the passing of his father, and come Thursday or Friday night, he had to fly out and go take care of what any man would have to show up for his father's passing. So to see him back here and playing, he's just a warrior on and off the court. Mad respect for this guy. Played really well, pushed the eventual finalist Montoya to 11-6 breaker, I believe. Played really well that first game, and Montoya just kicked it up a notch. It was great. Like you said, we talked about Carrasco. Just amazing to see him play that kind of ball. It's no longer a Conrrado Moscoso singles only. He's starting to display his will into the quarterfinals. And obviously Flores was the talk of the town. I'd say most fans, if we were to talk about who was the flair of the event, most fans would say Flores.
Sure. All right, so I want to talk about the next two category winners together, since this ended up being the tournament final. Even though Conrrado Moscoso is essentially, probably the second or third best player in most people's opinions out there, he's still kind of catching up points, and so he was seeded 7th in this event. He ended up advancing in a pretty close, interesting match over Flores, as you talked about previously, and then just whitewashed Jordi Alonso to get to the final. Meanwhile, from the top side, a little more chalky, Montoya beats Paria, who was kind of his longtime rival. They're a year apart in age, so they've been playing on and off, ever since that they were, top juniors back in Mexico. Montoya's kind of had the better of him lately, but that ended up giving us a Montoya-Moscoso final. So your winners of the 5 to 8 category, Moscoso, and the 1 to 4 category, Montoya. Now, Brian, tell us about the final.
Yeah, the final was action-packed. I really enjoyed the jousting. I believe the first game was 15-14, and there was really no room to breathe. I think at most players were getting two. Possibly there was one stretch of runs that gave a 3-point lead. It was just an incredible match. The serving percentage, I'd say both didn't really have it too well in the quarters or semis, not the level that they were displaying in the final. Especially Montoya when he was coming from behind, and he was able to dial in the drive serve, and he did a great job of mixing it up. I'd say he mixed it up much better than Conrrado, but ultimately at the end of the day, it was Conrrado that just found some really important runs that he made, especially in that tiebreaker. You can feel, I mean, those guys watching it firsthand and seeing how low they stay, and not just how low they stay through the shot, but how they just glide across the court in that low position. I mean, it's going to burn anybody's legs. These are true professionals. Watching the reaction time in the shot-making ability, I'd say one of the takeaways for Conrrado is, especially in the latter of the match, his way of putting the ball down on the right side at key moments were just absolutely deflating shots for Montoya. And like I said, he just found a way to win. And ultimately, I think that his stamina was a little bit better. He does. Here's the truth of it. He is a more powerful player than Montoya. Most of them are absolutely so creative on the backhand. And I really enjoyed the toughness from Montoya on the backhand side, which is probably why Conrrado started going over to the right a little more. But ultimately, just a great run from the quarterfinals. Actually, let's start with this. The round of 16, the buzzsaw 0-2 against Gerson Miranda, who's incredible, to the quarterfinals with Flores, 11-7 to the buzzsaw of Jordi Alonso, who had a great tournament. And then to take on someone as tough as Montoya, who handled his top of the draw really well, is a well-earned win for Moscoso.
You know, one of the criticisms of Moscoso is that he's a front runner. Like when you look at his career, there's a lot of matches in his past where he's lost a close first game and then he's just capitulated the rest of the match. We're starting to see him turn that around now. Instead of losing the first game 15-13 and then losing the second one 15-3, like we see out of him sometimes, you know, he found a different gear. You know, he cleaned up his act. As you mentioned, he kind of adjusted his serves a little bit. You know, and that's not easy to do against. That's not easy to do against a player of the maturity, kind of the veteran presence of Montoya.
You know, Todd, real quick too, I want to give an honorable mention here to Perea. That 4 spot, I believe, is the hardest seed to have because of who can come through an event. And unless they do a switch draw, which I haven't seen in a while, he's always going to play the number 1 seed, always going to play that 5th seed. So it's always going to be difficult from the quarterfinals on. And like I said, if you don't know what town you're going to, you could get one of these Starson juniors who only get a few events and they can roll straight into you. This was a better tournament for Perea. I was wondering how it was so different, 5-1 against Adam Mania going into that, because Adam is just an incredible player and he handled him so well in 2 games. And then to push Montoya, I really did see the kind of player that Andre Perea is come out in this match. He just was a few points short for moving on to a final, perhaps against Moscoso. So really good tournament from Andre as well.
All right, well, let's get into the next section. We're going to talk about who was your MVP, your fantasy bust, and your fantasy sleeper this past weekend.
So, Todd, we're going to go over who this MVP, the bust, the sleeper are, and I'll just get point blank period on. I thought the sleeper of this event for me was Kadim Carrasco coming through. Obviously, catches some major breaks, which kind of leads me into the bust of the tournament. You can either pick Alana Terra or Javier Mar. Nothing that they did wrong, just some physical injury that they're coming through. And ultimately, for me, this is a coin flip of who the MVP of this event is. It's easy to say the guy who wins in Conrrado Moscoso, but like I said, ultimately, I'm going to go MVP on this because the overall collective, the feel of the event, everyone was so privileged, so happy and excited to witness that match. And so I'm going to go with Jonathan Flores.
Sure, 100%. I'd like to call out, someone that I don't even know if we've mentioned his name yet, but, Jordi Alonso, he is now up to a number 6 seed. So because we were missing the top 3 ranked players this weekend, a bunch of guys got career high seedings. including Jordy. And he didn't fall victim to an early upset. He played a really solid game to beat Gastelum in the 16s. He took advantage of Natera going down and giving Carrasco that quarterfinal slot, although I probably would have favored Alonso over Natera anyway. And he ended up making it into the semis, which is a great showing for him. Kind of a quiet semifinal appearance for a guy who really needs those points to try to maintain that top 8 spot. Totally agree with your assessment about, Mar and Natera being busts, because they both went out of injuries. That seems a little unfair to them, though. Sometimes you can't help when you get injured. For me, the bust of the tournament was Garcia. And I say that because I thought I had him making a run into the semis. I thought that he could beat Paria, and I thought that he had an advantage if he eventually met up with Mania. He ends up beating Paria first game 15-6, and he's on his way. And then Paria, as you mentioned, just kind of turned the tide. Paria is a experienced tactician, kind of a cerebral player, and just found a way to get by a player who I thought was going to beat him. Eventually, Garcia goes down 11-9. That was a disappointing result for me. When I do my picks, I'm constantly picking like these younger, Bolivian native players that, like Miranda, like Flores, like Garcia. These players who we don't get to see a ton, but who always seem to get like these crazy wins out of the blue and make semis runs. And so for me, I was bummed that he didn't make that run. As far as an MVP for the weekend, Moscoso held serve, got to where he needed to go. I said at the onset of the event that if Montoya would never have an easier path to the final. And I say that, of course, with all due respect to the players that he ended up beating, Guillen, Sendri, Martel, and then eventually Paria in order to get to the final. But those are all manageable matches for Montoya at this point, and he didn't slip up, and he made it to the final as expected. So that's our MVPs, busts, and sleepers of the weekend. Fantasy players, I hope you agree, disagree. I hope that your bust didn't bust you up like they busted me, and that you ended up picking the right players because, hey, it's fantasy, and all you really care about is points. So just to review picks, I think like you, I picked Montoya in my 1 through 4, Moscoso in my 5 through 8, so I picked the final. I went away from my Flores pick, who I made in the last, I think I picked him back in Denver, and I picked Garcia, who didn't get me as many points as I needed to. However, Brian, I beat you this past weekend. I pipped you by 1. I hate to tell you, not only that, but yours truly, Todd Boss, is now number 2 in the season-long standing. Number 2, beaten Pineda. I'm ahead of Battleborn USA, whoever you are. Stop hiding behind your moniker. And, of course, the only person I'm trailing right now is Sam Big Canada Murray, who we should prevent him from playing. That's unfair. He's got inside information. Former tour player. He's probably got the edge. He's probably calling all these guys and getting the scoop before he enters his fantasy picks.
That's right. And the relatively unknown, we got to figure out who this is. USA Battleborn will drop to number 5. This is a case of the Mondays. I don't care how smart and cerebral you are, Todd, with the stats. Idea of losing to you in fantasy, I would rather fall off the Empire State Building, catch my eyelid on a nail, survive the fall, and let the crows eat me while I'm still alive. But on to the next one.
I will say, Brian, I am killing you right now in fantasy. I have 40 points and you have 39. I mean, I am absolutely dominating you in this competition. So just putting it out there.
Enjoy it, Todd. This has to feel good for you. It's at the top. I'm glad I let you taste it a little bit here, but ultimately, eye on the prize is the Samuel Murray guy. What would be even greater than seeing him continue to play is for him to do a sneak-in tournament. Sidebar, this is totally off subject. I'd say there's about 5 or 6 sleepers that can still play at a semifinal level or above that are not in these draws. And Sam Murray is one of them. It would be really cool at some point if all 5 or 6 of those players just happen to show up and spoil someone's day.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to see stuff like this way back in the day. Right? You go back to the first U.S. Open back in 1996, and I believe it was Karen McKinney. I know that we're mostly talking about the men, but Karen McKinney was a kind of an 80s tour pro who just popped into the U.S. Open and made the semis, and just like beat a bunch of tour players and like boom, make the semis. There's some interesting historical matches like that. In fact, famously, and you know who this is, Tim Sweeney, who was a multi-time, top junior, multi-time intercollegiate star at Southwest Missouri State. Then he gets a job. He kind of had got a real job, lived in Chicago, but he would enter the Chicago events when they rolled into town. And one year, I believe it was 95 or 94, that season, Sweeney enters, qualifies. He's the number 32 seed. Got to face up against Cliff Swain at the number 1 spot and beats him. It's basically the earliest that a top seed has ever gone out of an IRT event. Sweeney didn't end up winning that event, but that loss basically cost Cliff that year-end title. So, you're right. There's a lot of talented players out there. You're thinking about Murray. I'm thinking about, Landis still out there. De La Rosa played a couple weeks ago in his hometown in San Luis Potosí. You've got the Stockton boys. I bet you Jose Rojas and Marco could still freaking play. Those guys were both top 8 players. There's a bunch of Mexican players that used to flow. And yeah, you're right. It's kind of a bummer. I understand why people move on, but that's kind of where that's kind of where we are right now on the Pro Tour.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I flash back to the year that Gearbox came around. The next thing you know, you've got Javier Moreno, Alvaro Beltran. I think was it him, Mejian, that all made the semifinals. It was just electric. So, Todd, and that was a great blast from the past, by the way. As we close it up here, are there any lessons or takeaways from this weekend that you're going to apply to the next tournament? Because I can't stand Canada doing better than us.
I mean, I've got to stick to I got to stop overthinking my picks. I like the Flores guy. I shouldn't have gone away from him. I would have caught Big Sam if I picked the Flores. The next event, based on what the seedings are looking like and kind of based on who does or doesn't show up, we may run into another one of these too early Kane Conrrado matchups, which is going to factor into fantasy in a big way. So there's going to be some strategic picking there. If Conrrado is in that 5 to 8 range, do you pick him knowing that he's got to play into Kane in the semis? Or, do you try to pick somebody else who's going to make a run on the other side to possibly play into Kane if Kane makes a run to the final? So that's kind of that's going to be the strategy in the next fantasy competition.
Well, that's awesome to hear, Todd. Like I said, congrats. Welcome to the top 3. Enjoy. It ain't going to last long for you. Ultimately, everyone at home, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We love that you guys are playing. We want to see more fresh blood. Some blood for those sharks to smell in the water. Come make a splash. You can follow the podcast and be a part of all the action on Instagram at Racquetball Tour. And you can also catch us all the breakdown at the Golden State Open with all the photos. Catch us online on Facebook. You can follow the International Racquetball Tour as well and get all the information you need for our next event. Thank you so much for joining us. Todd Boss, Brian Pineda Live. Catch you guys next week.